Let's learn about while loops in Java. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Today we will start learning about loops, their benefits, and the very first type of loop that was developed in programming history, and that was while loop. And we will take a look at the dangerous pitfall on loops when it comes to programming. Stay tuned to the end of the video because even now we see different programmers that fall into this pitfall when they are modding Minecraft or programming for Java or even programming game development on something like Unity. And they don't understand why something is happening, and the whole problem sits in what we explained today. Okay, let's take a look at this code. It's just printing numbers from 1 to 10, isn't it? Now, you may say, what's the issue with that? You can just use print and print the numbers. However, imagine that this is, I don't know, 25 lines of complex code that is doing some calculations, that is doing different logical condition makings, and each line that we have here is equivalent of that 25 lines of code. Now, if I would want to copy that and paste it, it would become 250 lines of very complex code that each time I had to go back and tweak something in the calculations and make sure that everything works after the copy paste. This is why loops were created in the programming languages. Every programming language out there has the concept of loops because loops can execute a block of code as many times as you specify. And they are handy because they save time, reduce the errors, and reduce the amount of code you need to tweak. And at the same time, they make the code much more readable. For example, if I want to give you an example, let's say that this piece of code is just the if statement section, is just a code that we have to look for, I don't know, 200 students, okay? And each time the age and grade is just changing. Here I assigned a simple value to them, but for the sake of getting rid of errors, I had to put them there. However, let's say that we have 200 students in a class, and I need to loop through those 200 students, get their age, get their grade, and compare them and do whatever I want in between, Now, the if statement, the thinking about one single operation line in this scenario is around 30 lines of code. If I had to multiply it by 200 students, that would be 6,000 lines. Of course, I can copy paste and get the different ages, get the different grades, and I don't know, whatever I want, but I can make a loop that loops 200 times and then read the ages, read the grades, and then just do the whole scenario. We will take a look at this a little bit later when we understand what arrays are. But for time being, I will keep this code as an example, and let's talk about the loops, and especially the while loop. While loops were the very first loops that came into the programming history because the syntax was easy to understand. It was like this: while a condition is happening, do something. And there was an alternative to this. We will take a look at that in few seconds. However, we need to understand everything about this syntax first, and then we move forward and take a look at the alternative, older syntax that has a tiny mini difference. The main issue here is the condition. If you are not completely sure that this condition will end sometime in history of your program, then you will have something that is called infinite loop. Let's give you an example. If I say that y equals to 45, okay? And inside the condition, I'm checking that if y is less than 100. Take note, it's already putting a yellow line there saying that it's always true. This is an infinite loop. What will happen is that the program will come and assign the 45 to the y. Then it looks at the while and says, okay, I know that if this condition is true, I need to do the code between these two curly braces. And the first pass, y is 45. Of course, it will do it. Let's do something like this. System.out.println the y, okay? Now, if I execute the program, what you will see is that there is no end to this program, okay? Here we go. It's still printing, 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 and you see that this scroller jumps down and up, indicating that we are still printing, printing. If I keep this program running for millions of years, it will continue printing 45 for me. This is the pitfall in loops. It's called infinite loop. This can cause your program to freeze in some cases. For example, if we are not giving you any sort of output, if we are just doing some math calculations to assign a final value to something, suddenly we see that when we execute the program is frozen because this loop is always true and the calculations are repeating themselves millions of times, assigning the value millions of times, but they never get out of this while loop to continue the program. I had seen it in Discord when someone asked, and the guy is a Minecraft modder, a newbie, and he's trying to put a cooldown on an item for some reason. The reason is irrelevant. However, what is he doing? He's assigning a value. Well, it's an API call, forget about that, but he's assigning a value to something. Then immediately he's checking this section with this section plus 60. And he's making sure that this is smaller than this plus 60. Basically, he's asking if this is smaller than the same value plus 60. Well, it's always true. It's exactly like this. We are assigning y to be 45, and then we say if y is smaller than 45 plus something. And this is exactly the same condition. And he was saying that, hey, I don't know why every time I execute Minecraft, the game is freezing on the while loop. That is the pitfall on loops. And you should make sure that your loops are never infinite. So how to make sure that this is not infinite is that our condition at some point should return false. Because as long as the condition is true, the while loop is continuing, isn't it? So we need to somehow make sure that at some point our condition will become false. In this scenario, it's as easy as incrementing y by once. Now, if I run the program, you see that it breaks without me touching anything. And what it's doing is that it starts printing from 45 down to 99. And because I set smaller than 100, the moment that y becomes 100, this condition returns false and the program jumps out of the while loop and finishes. So for example, if I start with 0, or actually saying 1, and saying less than or equal to 100, now we make sure that this loop runs 100 times. Let's take a look. And as you see, it starts with 1 and it goes down all the way to 100. Now, you should get used to index being 0 because later down the road, you will see why we start with zeros in our loops. But if I start y with 0 and I want the loop to have 100 execution turnovers, now I need to make sure that y is less than 100 because it will start with 0 and execute once. So when it executes for the 99 as y, it is already executed 100 times. So we don't need the 100 here. And that's a concept you should get used to. Start from 0, less than the number of times you want to execute your order, and that's it. You are golden. Now that we understood this concept, we can come back here and say, okay, for example, if we want to run all this code, we can just put it inside here in while loop, and it will execute 100 times, 200 times, as many times as we need. The alternative, an older syntax for while loop, is do while. Now, do while is a little bit different. We start with do, and then at the end, we put the while condition, okay? So we say, for example, while, again, while is less than 100, okay? Now, what is the difference between these two programs? The top one and the bottom one. What is the difference here? If our condition is not correct on the while loop, we will never see this code execute. Okay, so for example, if y equals 100, or let's say 1000, why not? We will never see the y plus, for example, let's say y. Okay, but if we use the same code here and that and say do while, here things are different. Here we are executing code at least once before checking the condition. So take note, with y being 1000, this piece of code will never ever execute because we are first checking for the condition, then we are jumping into the condition if it meets the necessities. However, here we are executing the code once and then we are checking the condition, and if the condition is correct, we will go back and execute it again. So if I run the program now, you will see just 1000 do while, and you don't see the 1000 while because y equals 1000, the condition is not met, jump after the curly brace, y equals 1000, do, okay, we do this, we increment y by 1, we now check the y. Now, y is 1001, is less than 100, it's false. Then we break out of it and we will continue the code under the lines here. Okay, that's the difference between the while loop and the do while. It's minimal, but it's really critical. If you have a code that you need to execute at least once, then use do while. But many people will use while loops. I did see using the do while in a very, very limited cases. Honestly, even the while loop is not very commonly used because in the next video, we will talk about for loops and for each loops, and you will see that they are much easier to understand and handle compared to the while loop, because in while loops and do while loops, you can easily fall into the infinite execution problem. In for and for each loops, it's really hard to have that condition. It happens every now and then, but it's not as common as these two. There are special cases that you need to fall back to this syntax instead of a for loop. We will talk about them in the next video, but whenever you are using these two, be very cautious about infinite loops. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.